Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 9th day of November. There are wind advisories still out along the Alaska Range, right on down into the northern Kuskokwim Valley. Through the passes, gusts 65 miles an hour, 40 to 65 miles an hour, continuing tonight into Monday morning, and also off to the east there, a little bit lower on the gusts, but not much, and that's mostly west of the Toe Cutoff. For the satellites out west, you can see the western bearing here, as well as the Northwest Pacific. This is the low pressure area that Friday brought the strong winds into the southwest Bering Sea and the western Aleutians. Also yesterday, that's slowly weakening, but still pretty good low out there with gale force winds across the Bering and Aleutians, and a lot of showers coming in behind in the colder air, beginning to mix with snow a little bit back here to the west, and then that all snow in the colder air over the Sea of Okhotsk. And the next system developing here just off of Japan, east of Japan. And you can see that's going to mostly slide eastward there into the Pacific, and then will at some point probably take a turn to the north as it approaches 160, 150 west. For the today, we had good south to north flow here. This is that front that sort of re-energizes this low wave developed with the northwest push jet back here to the west, carrying the cold air southward. That brought good gales in along and east of Kodiak Island, and some pretty gusty winds, gusted over 60 miles an hour today along the Alaska Peninsula, not the Alaska Range, the western Alaska Range. And again, those windy conditions all along the Alaska Range there, especially through the northern passes. And breezy conditions back to the northwest as well, but not quite as windy. Up to 40 miles an hour though in gusts across the Seward Peninsula and Norton Sound, with snow reported at Nome today, and rainfall about 1.5 inches as this rolled through Kodiak in the last 24 hours there, 1.44 inches to be exact, but that cut off considerably to the east, about 0.09 of an inch falling over at Cordova, and heavier amounts so up across the Seward Peninsula, about 1/2 inch falling in the Seward area, and then rain and snow in an area of snow back to the northwest, trying to push into the Kotzebue Sound area and back up along the coast. And there's that low center getting fairly close to St. Paul there as it slowly edges its way eastward. Should take a turn to the north and then northwest, pull back toward the Russian coast as another system drops down across the Aleutians Monday night and Tuesday. Otherwise, on the chart today, this is roughly the location of the front earlier today, about in this position. The strong southeast winds out in advance of it, with the rain heavy at times, Kodiak Island pushing up toward the Kenai Peninsula, and the areas of snow back to the northwest. That broke out to just some scattered rain and snow showers with temperatures well above freezing, as well as some sunshine, and then more precipitation here over Bristol Bay with that low center. Otherwise, just this low here west of the Pribilofs dominating the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Gale force winds today all across that area with lots of showers, and the rainfall's kind of sliding eastward here, the jet coming up and then cutting across in this direction, and that carrying some moisture, light moisture, over toward Yakutat, the eastern Gulf Coast. Some of that will kind of just dissipate as it approaches the panhandle there, but look for some variable clouds to move into the northern areas at times. but it should stay relatively dry with high pressure. That cloud increase you can see here mostly over the northern areas and back mostly south of Yakutat, but you could get a little moisture there. Rain, Cordova, Prince William Sound mixture as you move inland, and a narrow band of snow here, kind of enhanced on the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range, and areas of snow back up to the northwest with some gusty winds, improving a little bit, but still kind of breezy there for the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula areas. Another trough will bring some rain and snow showers. Continued windy conditions, could still see gusts of 40 miles an hour there from Nunivak Island and the Yukon Delta coast, and the Pribilofs looking at possible gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour tonight. A front developing right in this area with some pretty good precipitation. Southwest flow ahead of that. It's going to make for kind of wet conditions there on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. Periods of rain for the eastern Aleutians, more showers and gusty winds, and turning cooler back out toward Chimay-Attu. And for Monday, this is all that's left of the frontal boundary right through here. The next one develops not quite as strong, but it's going to keep it windy here along the southwest coast with rain and snow edging its way eastward. More of a hit and miss on the precipitation, mostly over the mountains terrain over the southwest interior, along with some areas of clearing. Dry conditions, though, from the Copper River Basin all the way up across the Yukon Tanana valleys to the North Slope. Looking like good VFR up there. Could be some marginal VFR in the southern slopes of the Central Brooks Range back out to the northwest, and lots of marginal VFR kind of skirting the coastline here over the southwest coast on up into the Bering Strait, and rain and rain showers back out to the west. Continued windy conditions. You can see this low forecast to pull northward slowly, but the moisture here with that next system beginning to spread up toward Kodiak Island late tomorrow. Looks like that will spread in over the island for periods of light rain and lower flying conditions here, especially along the east side of the island there, and that'll continue into Tuesday as that main low pulls off to the southeast. Good southeast wind flow there is going to pull that moisture northward along that developing front, which moves inland tomorrow night to roughly this position on Tuesday. Mostly light snow here to the northwest, or back to the northwest, a mixture, and then all rain Bristol Bay into the Kuskokwim Delta and that over into Prince William Sound, but amounts look pretty light. And then it cuts off again before you get to Yakutat. Mostly sunny skies there. Some gusty northeast winds over the Panhandle. You can see higher pressure here over the Northwest Territories, ridging back over the Yukon. So that should provide some pretty gusty winds over the northern southeast coast. Next to the channeled areas, you'll see kind of gusty conditions. Otherwise, along the coast, not too bad. Light winds up along the Arctic coast from south to north should make it mostly clear. And then you start picking up the clouds as you get down toward Point Lay and, of course, Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. Chance of snow there, breezy conditions. And this system dropping pretty rapidly southeastward here should move to about that location for a chance of rain over the eastern Aleutians. And you can see the low kind of falling apart here, the main low center back up toward the Russian coast there. And a lot of moisture spreading into the western Aleutians, kind of another wave developing there, and colder air spreading in behind that. Temperatures today lower to mid 40s over the Panhandle with 41 at Juneau, 46 at Metlakatla, 39 degrees in Valdez with a 31 over at Gulkana, mid to upper 40s here over the Kenai Peninsula. In fact, 49 there at Homer was the warm spot in the state, as well as Ketchikan had 49 also, and 44 in Kenai. Some of that air is getting up into the Anchorage area, and the Susitna Valley, Talkeetna, 37 degrees, 16 up at Fairbanks with the gusty winds, Delta 24, otherwise 17 at Tanana, 32 at McGrath. Over the southwest, lower to mid 40s, but 39 at Dillingham, 41 in Bethel, and up to the northeast, Stanutuvik, 10 degrees above zero. See contrasted here from east to west, upper 20s to lower 30s across the northwest. Arctic coast, single numbers, but Barter Island, 11 and 34, pushing above freezing at Cape Lisburne, 32 at Gamble, 33 at Nome. Yukon Delta and the lower valleys there, mostly in the mid 30s for the Pribilofs, they lower 40s, and 40s here over the Aleutians, but the colder air spreading into Shemya, dropping down to 37 degrees. And for the lows tonight, below zero in some areas here over the Yukon Valley, possibly down over the eastern Tanana Valley there, the 40-mile country, but much milder back out toward the west, upper 20s to lower to mid 30s to lower 40s along the Alaska Peninsula, out into the Aleutians, and the chillier air out over the western zones, 30s for the southeast coast. And highs tomorrow, about like today, 40s for the Panhandle, 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s here from the Bristol Bay coastline all the way up into the Seward Peninsula, lower to mid 30s, Kotzebue Sound, the Noatak Valley, and teens on the eastern Arctic coast with 20s to lower 30s to the west. And the coolest areas, looks like it'll be up here around Arctic Village and the upper Yukon Valley. Let's see, flying weather. IFR possible or pretty likely here into western Prince William Sound and long areas in the North Gulf Coast. Marginal conditions right up along the northern coastline. Pretty good VFR over the interior, especially the north slope and the Arctic coast. And some marginal VFR again on the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range. And IFR here right along the coast up toward the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, but southeast winds, VFR, Bristol Bay. There's IFR out over the Aleutians. Passes Anaktuvuk, VFR except possible marginal conditions on the southern entrance, and same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR. VFR on the eastern approaches, IFR possible at times on the western entrances. And for Rainy, same pattern, but go for marginal VFR. I don't think there'll be any IFR in the eastern entrance, but you never know. But more than likely there'll be VFR on the west entrance. And for windy, lower conditions to the south and VFR to the north. Isabel, same pattern there. And Mentasta could be marginal a little bit, but that would be on the southern entrance, but that should become VFR by noontime tomorrow. And for Tanita, VFR possible on the east side, otherwise pretty good. Portage, occasional IFR, lowest conditions on the east entrance and a little bit better to the west. Chilkoot and White, good VFR. And for the freezing levels, at the surface late tonight, early tomorrow morning, right along the coastline, northern Cook Inlet, back up to the north toward the Seward Peninsula with those southerly winds, and about 4,000 to 6,000 feet over the Panhandle. Otherwise, not much of a change out there over the Bering Sea, but you can see the cooler air coming in from the west-northwest, and also up here over the northern areas with that warm pocket lifting northward. Icing threats tomorrow, Prince William Sound down into the Gulf and along the Alaska Peninsula, Pacific side. A little more widespread over the eastern Aleutians and some hit and miss stuff here over the southwest interior on out into the Bering Sea. South to north flow, another jet max here at about 150 knots, but the flow diverges. This area going back to the northwest is 45 knots, and the main jet cutting up over the eastern Gulf Coast and then diving southeastward again for the 9,000 foot winds up to 55 knots, still pretty windy through this area, right on up to the Brooks Range, and 45 knots extending out along the southwest coast to Nunivak Island into the northern Bering Sea areas more westerly around that low. Light variable winds with high pressure for the Panhandle, and at 3,000 feet, a pretty wide area of winds here, 35 to 45 knots, and with that will be moderate chop, possible severe out there in the northern Bering Sea, and smoother over the eastern interior down across the Panhandle. I'll be back at the marine forecast after the break.
Like most people, Dennis Beam and his daughter Kelly weren't worried about the cold the night their car slid into a ditch in the middle of a blizzard.
I wasn't really too concerned. I'd been stuck before and it wasn't all that deep. But the wind kept picking up and the storm just didn't let up. I was getting wet trying to get the car out, but it was no good, so I decided to wait. About 9 that morning, we'd been stuck about 4 hours. The storm wasn't stopping at all, and we were really getting cold. I figured nothing was going to happen up there on a country road. No help, period. So I decided to go for help. You stay warm and you stay in the car no matter what, okay? Okay. Everything's going to be okay. I love you.
Love you too.
Okay, now, you be good. Right there. Right there, okay?
I didn't want to be left alone, but Dad said he'd be back for me. He promised.
Leaving Kelly was like leaving my heart behind, and I didn't know when I'd get it back. I couldn't see a thing. It was freezing. My eyes were frozen shut. I had ice all over my feet, but I had to keep going. There was nothing else to do.
Help! Please, this is Kelly Dean. We had a CB radio in the car, so I tried to call for help. Help! But no one answered. I kept wondering where Daddy was. Can you hear me?
It took me 3 hours to get to a house, and it was literally my last ounce of energy. My feet were black, parts of my face were frozen, but that wasn't my main concern. Kelly was still in that car, and the police said they couldn't get to her until the storm stopped, and there was nothing I could do.
After it got dark, I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't stop thinking about Dad. I had 3 pieces of candy, but I wanted to save them for Dad because I thought he'd be hungry when he came back.
After 10 hours, I didn't know what to think. She'd been alone so long. There was a lot of worry time then. Yeah, a lot of thinking time. Kelly's okay, I think. I had to leave her in the car.
Sometimes in the car, I dream that Daddy might not come back.
About 1 the next morning, the storm
thank
broke, and the police headed off to get Kelly.
Have you heard anything?
Nothing yet. All I could think was that after 19 hours, who knows, she'd been there so long with no heat. I kept hoping I'd put enough emphasis on staying in that car until I got back.
When the rescuers came, I asked if Dad was okay. He said yeah. I was glad, because it was all over and Dad was okay.
It's for you?
Yes. Thank God. And then the call came. She was
Where's she
okay. My whole world lit up then.
Oh, thank God. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. She's okay.
Kelly suffered only mild symptoms of hypothermia. As the snow buried the car, it insulated and protected her from the severe cold and high wind. Dennis was badly frostbitten because of his walk through the snow. Which of the two had been in the most danger? Without a doubt, Dennis. As soon as he left the car, he put himself in tremendous jeopardy. Neither father or daughter were well prepared for the extreme weather conditions they encountered. A few carefully chosen items would have given them the extra margin of safety they needed. One blanket wasn't enough. Sleeping bags would have been better. Extra clothing would have been extremely welcome after Dennis got wet. Matches and candles. A flashlight with extra batteries. Signal flares. High-calorie, non-perishable food. A shovel and a sack of sand, ashes, or even kitty litter. And a first aid kit. These are examples of items you need. Winter travel is serious business, and you must be prepared for it. Your car should be in good working order. Know the route you plan to take, and tell somebody else where you're going and when you plan to arrive. Check the latest weather information before you leave. The National Weather Service provides up-to-the-minute weather forecasts and can predict most severe storms. If the people in our next story had listened to the weather forecast, they would be alive today. Traveling back to school, 2 students drove directly into a severe winter storm. They had a 4-wheel drive vehicle and were sure they could get through. First, they came upon a roadblock warning travelers to pull off the highway. They went around it. Several miles further, they got stuck in a large snowdrift directly under a bridge. They tried to dig out, but it was hopeless. Soaking wet, they changed clothes. Stuck in the snowdrift, isolated from help, they decided to sit it out. Wait until someone came along and found them. The next morning, someone did. They were dead. They had made two fatal mistakes. One, traveling in the face of deteriorating weather conditions. And two, ignoring a police roadblock. Ironically, it appeared that after they got stuck, they did everything right. They started the car every so often to keep warm. They changed into dry clothing after getting wet trying to dig out. And they didn't abandon their car. However, stuck under the bridge, the wind trapped fatal carbon monoxide fumes around and inside the car. A freak accident? Maybe. But they really died because they didn't use common sense. After those first two mistakes, every other decision only compounded their danger. Ed and Paul Maluski, Dennis and Kelly Beam could have been winter storm fatalities. The two students were. Being prepared for winter emergencies will always better your odds in a snowstorm. So will using good judgment and common sense. These guidelines, if you get caught in a severe snowstorm, will help you survive the cold.
Forecasts, marine forecasts, northeast winds, north to northeast, 10 to 15 knots tomorrow. Pretty light from a east-northeast direction out along the outer coastline as well. Then for Tuesday, a little bit of a pickup, especially up here over the northern areas with higher pressure and over the Yukon. Up to 30 knots, otherwise 15 to 20 higher gusts, both over the central southern inside waters as well as out along the coast. For the Kodiak Island tomorrow, southeast 15 here on the east side, Chillicothe Strait east-northeast, light. Southeasterlies, Kamishak Bay down across the Barrens, 20 knots for the North Gulf Coast, and pretty light for Cook Inlet and about 15 for Prince William Sound. A little bit of an increase on Tuesday. Small craft advisories back into the North Gulf Coast, 20 knots Prince William Sound, a little gustier in the south entrance there. Small craft advisories is all up into Kamishak Bay, and along the east side of Kodiak Island, 30 knots possible. For the Alaska Peninsula, southeast 25 tomorrow, and that same wind pattern back up towards Sitkinak, a little bit lighter for Bristol Bay. And for Tuesday, east winds of 15 for the bay there, and southeast less, 15 to 20 knots for the peninsula, and northeast 15 from Sitkinak to Chignik or Sand Point. And then for the western Aleutians here, northwest winds 30 knots coming down below gale force, but westerlies at 40 knots here for the west central Aleutians, and small craft advisories or gales for just about all of the other areas here except for the north side of, or north of Unalaska. And then for Tuesday, 15 to 20 knots for the Fox Islands, and then you kind of slide back into the small craft advisories, northwest 35 knots, and southwest 35, narrow area of gales there west of Adak, and northwest again 30 knots for the west side. For the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, north across St. Lawrence Island, southeast 25 knots, gales for St. Matthew Island, small crafts for the Pribilofs, and 20 knots there for the southern area west of Kuskokwim Bay. Southeast 30 knots, could see some gale force gusts there for St. George here for the Pribilofs on Tuesday. Otherwise 15 to 20, and then up to 25 knots, still small craft advisories for St. Lawrence Island, back down into the northern Bering Sea. And for the Arctic coast, kind of a light variable wind condition tomorrow, otherwise east 15 on the central coast, southeast 20 knots, Point Hope down to the Bering Strait. And for Tuesday, not much of a change here in the west, and southeast 10 to 15, east 15 to 20 possible there on the eastern stretch of the coast. For tonight, front pushing inland, be a narrow band or kind of a disorganized dissipating band of light snow here, enhanced on the mountains with the upslope conditions, and more so back off to the northwest, staying mostly clear, variably cloudy here over the Yukon Valley. Some areas dropping below zero, fair on the Arctic coast, rain along the North Gulf Coast, but not all that heavy, and a lot of rain spreading into the eastern Aleutians up along the Pacific side of the peninsula tonight. High pressure keeps it fair, mostly clear, with light winds there over the southeast coast, and a few flurries lingering here on the southern slopes of the Alaska Range. And then for tonight, we'll see that low begins to pull up to the north and then to the northwest. Another front develops down in here tonight, pushes in toward the coast. It won't really slam the coast with a south to north wind flow, but the original front now just a trough dragging through south central Alaska and back to the northwest with decreasing snow, and still fair over the eastern areas. A little bit of moisture tries to slip into the northern southeast coast there, especially around Elephant Cove. Otherwise, a pretty nice day once again. Some moisture with this system as it drops off to the southeast. The southeast flow is going to drag some rain up across Kodiak as early as late tomorrow afternoon or as late as tomorrow evening. And it looks like rain with gusty winds along and north of the island there into the Barrens again, and southern Cook Inlet. More rain for the southern Kenai Peninsula, dry up to the north, areas of snow back to the northwest along the front there. And
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.